Okay, so in this tutorial we're going to be doing some more basic Unity skills. This time we'll be going over things like adding objects, moving the camera around, adding components, and so on. So let's get started. So you might notice that your scene view looks a little different. That's because I went ahead and moved my game screen tab over. And I do that so I can see live adjustments into my camera's perspective. So you'll see if I were to take my camera and adjust my rotation, I can actually see it move. And so yeah, that's why that's there. Anyways, you don't have to have it like this if you don't want, but that's how I like having it. Over here in our hierarchy, let's go ahead, right click, add a 3D object, and we'll do a cube for now. Everyone likes cubes. Now it looks like our cube is in the center of the screen here, but if I actually right click and move around, you can see that it's not exactly centered. And that's because, well, we didn't tell it where to create our object, so it just put it right in the center of our screen, and that didn't happen to be right in the middle of our area here. And you see it's not even in our game view. So over here on the transform, you see it has a bunch of random numbers. We can right click and transform to set it back to 0, 0. And all of a sudden, our cube is right in the center of our camera's perspective, which is perfect. Alright, game complete. Just kidding. So obviously this is a very boring game, and we're going to be adding a lot to it. So, how do we make a game where a white cube, and that's it? How do we make it more interesting? We give it color. So over here in the assets menu, we're going to do just that. So we're going to create a material, and I recommend you follow some sort of standardized naming conventions, however you like really, but when you have big projects it can get kind of confusing. So I'm going to call that mat for material, underscore cube for now, and over here in the inspector you can see it actually gave us a lot more stuff to look at, but you can ignore all that for now. All we're worried about is the albedo, which is basically the color values. But before we do that, I'm going to take the assets, or the material, drag it onto the cube, and nothing really changed here because it's still the default white value. But if I click on the albedo, it gives me a little color wheel, and I can actually see it update in real time now since I already applied the material to the cube. And I could have dragged and dropped it onto the cube in the hierarchy as well. It's the same thing. So I guess I can choose a color now. This is nice. I'll choose a nice pink purple color. That's nice. Okay. Cool. Game complete. Not really. Well, we'll do a few more things. So the cube is now much prettier to look at, but it still doesn't do anything. So if we click on our cube, actually, let's do this. So you can double click on the cube to move to your object you clicked on, by the way, in case you lose your objects. But also I can right click rename, or I can rename it up here in the inspector. I'll rename it to main character, since there's not a lot of characters in this game. And I want our cube to obey the laws of gravity, so I'm going to give it a component over here. So I think I said this in the last tutorial, but components are basically, I guess you could call them like indicators of an object's traits. So like the transform component details its position, rotation, and scale in world space. And certain objects come by default with different components. You can disregard these for now. Box collider is basically, you know, if you want it to collide with certain objects, you need this component. But for now, we're going to add in our own component, and if you type in rigid body, we're going to add that. This basically tells the computer to give it some sort of physics, and by default, gravity is checked on. And if we play our game, you see it starts falling. Now, also you might notice that in your game, by default it comes play focused, which means it doesn't go to maximized screen like that. I like my my tests to be in full screen though, so if you're wondering why it's different, you can go over here to play and click maximized. Okay, so yeah, now our game is much more interesting. We have a cube that falls. Let's go ahead and do one more thing before we close out the tutorial. Let's take our main character here. I want our main character to collide with something. So also before that, I guess I want the character to be on screen a little longer. So let's take our camera here and adjust it a little bit. I'm going to move it up, and you see if I just drag this arrow here, it gives me these numbers that aren't exactly rounded. But if I go back here for back to 1, if you hold Control and then move it, the numbers start to step by a certain increment, whatever you set that to be. So I'm going to set it up to probably 4.5. Looks around about right. Now I'm also going to rotate my camera to give a sort of a top-down view. I think that's pretty good. Probably 40 degrees. Okay. Now our ball should fall and it should be on the screen a lot longer. Okay. Now let's give our, did I say ball? I mean our cube. So let's give it something to land on. You could do a cube, you could do anything really, but I'm going to add a plane, which, as you know, is just a, also reset the transform, just a two-dimensional square. I'm going to move it down by pressing Control, move it down probably around here. Looks about right. Probably 8. Okay. What's better than a white plane? A plane with a little bit of color. So let's create another material for our plane. I'll drag and drop, and I'll adjust. Let's see, what's a color that goes well with our purple color? Well, I'm pretty sure color theory says something like complementary colors are the ones near it, so like something like this or something like this would match, and also something, I forget the word, but a color that's on the far side of the color spectrum, like green, matches pretty well. So I'd say that looks pretty good. And just like that, we have a cube that falls onto a plane. Perfect AAA game of the year. Okay, so that's pretty much it for the tutorial. You'll notice that our plane didn't start falling too, just like our main character, and that's because we didn't give it a rigid body. If you wanted your, we kind of sped over it last time, but if you wanted your plane to fall, you go over to here, add component, give it a rigid body, use gravity, and now both our objects are falling. But of course that's not what we want, so you can go over here and remove component as well, and we get back to our 5 out of 5 game. So that'll do it for this first tutorial. Let me know if you have any questions, and stay tuned for the next one.